The moment Margaret Hawthorne rose from her seat in the courtroom and jabbed her manicured finger at me, I knew my worst nightmare was about to unfold. Her voice sliced through the formal silence like broken glass. "Your Honor, this woman is nothing but a worthless failure who can't even hold down a minimum wage job." Every eye in that sterile room turned toward me. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. My throat constricted as if invisible hands were squeezing it shut. I wanted to disappear into the wooden bench beneath me, to become invisible, to be anywhere but here. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But before I could even process the full weight of her attack, Judge Chen cleared her throat and lifted a cream-colored envelope from her desk. "Before we proceed," she said calmly, "I have a letter here from the minor child that I believe the court needs to hear." My heart stopped. I hadn't known Lily had written anything. As the judge adjusted her glasses and began to read, I gripped the edge of the defendant's table so hard my knuckles turned white, completely unaware that my 8-year-old daughter was about to change everything. That morning had started like any other court date in our seemingly endless custody battle. I'd been up since 4:30, unable to sleep, running through every possible scenario in my mind. The coffee maker gurgled in my tiny kitchen while I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker off as dawn crept across the Phoenix sky. 3 years. That's how long this fight had been going on. 3 years of legal documents, court appearances, and accusations that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. My name is Isabella Chen, though everyone calls me Izzy. I'm 36 years old, and despite what my former in-laws would have you believe, I'm neither worthless nor a failure. But standing in that courthouse hallway, adjusting my only good blazer for the 100th time, I certainly felt like both. The marriage to Nathan had ended 2 years prior, but the divorce was just the beginning of my real nightmare. His family, the Hawthornes, had never approved of me. Not when Nathan first brought me home during college, not when we married 8 years ago, and certainly not now. They were old Phoenix money, the kind of family whose name was on hospital wings and university buildings. I was the daughter of immigrant parents who ran a small alterations shop downtown. In their eyes, I had trapped their golden boy, convinced him to marry beneath his station. When Nathan decided he wanted a divorce to pursue his secretary, a blonde from Scottsdale, with the right pedigree, his family saw their chance to finally excise me from their lives completely. But there was Lily, my beautiful, brilliant 8-year-old daughter who had her father's green eyes but my stubborn spirit. She was the reason I kept fighting, kept showing up to these soul-crushing court dates, kept enduring the Hawthornes, campaigned to paint me as an unfit mother. They wanted full custody, arguing that their wealth and connections could provide Lily with opportunities I never could. They weren't entirely wrong about the opportunities, but they were dead wrong about what my daughter truly needed. I had arrived at the courthouse early that morning, hoping to center myself before the storm. The security guard, Jerome, nodded at me with something that might have been sympathy. He'd seen me here enough times to know my face, my case, my story. The marble floors echoed with each step as I made my way to the family court wing. The building smelled like old paper and industrial cleaner, with an undertone of desperation that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. This place had witnessed so many family implosions, so many hearts breaking in real time. My lawyer, Patricia Yamamoto, was already waiting outside courtroom 4B. She was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. I'd hired her with the last of my savings after my first attorney proved woefully outmatched by the Hawthornes' legal team. Patricia didn't promise miracles, but she promised to fight. This morning, though, even she looked concerned. "They're bringing in character witnesses," she said quietly, pulling me aside. Margaret, Richard, and Nathan's sister Caroline are all planning to testify. My stomach dropped. About what? Your employment history, your living situation, your background. She said the last word carefully, but I knew what she meant. The Hawthornes had always made subtle and not-so-subtle comments about my Filipino heritage, about how Lily should be raised in a proper American household. I straightened my shoulders. Let them talk. I've done nothing wrong. Patricia squeezed my arm. I know. Just remember, don't let them bait you. Stay calm, state facts, and trust the process. Trust the process. I'd been trusting the process for 3 years, and it had gotten me shared custody with supervised visitations and a mountain of legal debt. But what choice did I have? The courtroom filled slowly. Nathan arrived with his parents and sister, all of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Richard Hawthorne, tall and silver-haired, nodded curtly at the bailiff, like they were old friends. Margaret, his wife, wore a St. John's suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Caroline, Nathan's younger sister, clutched a leather portfolio, her engagement ring catching the light. And Nathan himself looked like the boy I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago, except for the coldness in his eyes when they met mine. My side of the courtroom remained conspicuously empty except for Patricia and myself. My parents wanted to be here, but I'd begged them to stay away. The shop couldn't afford to close for a day, and frankly, I didn't want them to hear the things I knew would be said about our family. My younger brother Miguel was in Seattle, finishing his residency. My best friend Sarah was watching Lily. It was just me and Patricia against the Hawthorne machine. Judge Angela Chen presided. No relation to me despite the shared surname. She was known for being fair but no nonsense, which gave me a sliver of hope. As she called the session to order, I forced myself to breathe normally, to unclench my fists, to appear as the stable, loving mother I knew I was. The court reporter's fingers flew across her keys, preserving every word for posterity. I wondered idly if someday Lily would read these transcripts, would see how hard I fought for her. Nathan's attorney, a man named Brendan Fitzgerald who looked like he'd walked out of a legal drama, stood first. Your Honor, we're here today to request a modification of the current custody arrangement. My clients believe it is in the best interest of the minor child, Lily Chen Hawthorne, to reside primarily with her father and paternal grandparents. But Judge Chen raised her hand, a slight gesture that commanded instant attention. Before we proceed, she said, her voice cutting through the tension, there's a matter I need to address. She lifted a cream-colored envelope from her desk, and I noticed for the first time that it was addressed in careful, looping handwriting I didn't recognize. This morning, my clerk received this letter. It's from the minor child in this case, Lily Chen Hawthorne. My heart stopped. Lily had written to the judge? When? How? I hadn't known anything about this. I glanced at Patricia, who looked equally surprised. Across the aisle, Nathan's legal team was exchanging confused looks. Judge Chen adjusted her reading glasses, the courtroom so quiet I could hear the paper rustling as she unfolded it. I've reviewed this letter carefully, and I believe it's relevant to our proceedings today. The child's voice, after all, should be heard in matters that affect her so profoundly. She began to read, and Lily's words filled the courtroom like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, my breath caught in my throat, as my 8-year-old daughter's voice rang out clear and true in that sterile room where her future hung in the balance. Judge Chen cleared her throat softly before beginning to read Lily's letter aloud. Dear Judge Chen, my name is Lily and I am 8 years old. My teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, helped me with the spelling, but these are my own words. I heard Mom crying last night again, and I decided I need to tell someone the truth about my family. The judge paused, glancing up briefly before continuing. I felt my chest tighten. Lily had heard me crying? I thought I'd been so careful, running the water in, the bathroom muffling my sobs in a towel. But children notice everything, especially when their world is falling apart. People keep fighting about who should take care of me, the letter continued in Judge Chen's steady voice. Grandma Margaret says Mom is poor and can't give me nice things. Dad says I'm happier at his house. But nobody asks me what I see every day. Across the courtroom, Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Richard's expression remained neutral, but I caught him glancing at his wife with something that might have been concern. Nathan stared at his hands, his jaw clenched. When I'm at Dad's house, I have my own big room with a TV and a computer and lots of toys. Grandma Margaret buys me pretty dresses and takes me to fancy restaurants. Grandpa Richard shows me his golf trophies and talks about sending me to boarding school like Aunt Caroline. The judge's voice carried no emotion, but the words themselves painted a picture that made the Hawthornes straighten with pride. But at Dad's house, nobody really talks to me. Dad is usually on his phone or at work. When his girlfriend Ashley comes over, they go upstairs and tell me to watch TV. Grandma Margaret asks me about school, but she doesn't listen to my answers. She just tells me to speak properly and sit up straight. Grandpa Richard pats my head and calls me the child when he talks to other people. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted palpably. Judge Chen continued reading, her voice taking on a slightly softer tone. At Mom's apartment, I share her bed because my room is also her office. We eat spaghetti with butter on Wednesdays because that's when money is tight. I only have 3 dolls and my bike is from a garage sale. Mom shops at the discount store and cuts coupons from the newspaper. Margaret made a small sound of vindication, but Judge Chen raised her hand slightly without looking up from the letter. But at Mom's apartment, we talk about everything. She knows all my friends' names, and their pets' names too. She helps me with homework even when she's tired from work. When I had nightmares about the divorce, she stayed up all night reading me stories. When Jenny Martinez said my lunch was weird because I had rice and fish, Mom taught me to be proud of being Filipino. She shows me pictures of Lola and tells me stories about the Philippines. My vision blurred as tears threatened to spill over. I hadn't known about the lunch incident. Lily had never mentioned it. But she'd started requesting more American foods for school, and now I understood why. Mom never says bad things about Dad or his family. When I told her Grandma Margaret said she was a gold digger, Mom just hugged me and said Grandma was upset about the divorce, and people sometimes say mean things when they're hurt. When Dad forgot my school play, Mom said he was probably busy with work, and we should forgive him. Nathan's face flushed red. He had forgotten her play, the one where she played a sunflower in the spring recital. I'd recorded it on my phone, sitting in the front row alone, cheering loud enough for 2 parents. Grandma says Mom can't provide opportunities for me, but that's not true. Mom takes me to the library every Saturday, and we read books about women scientists and artists. She taught me to count in Tagalog and Spanish. We go to free concerts in the park, and she shows me how music can tell stories without words. She saves quarters in a jar marked Lily's college fund, even though I know she needs that money for groceries. Judge Chen's voice wavered slightly on that last sentence. She took a sip of water before continuing. Last month, when I got an asthma attack at Dad's house, Ashley didn't know what to do. She called Dad, but he was in a meeting. Grandma Margaret said I was being dramatic. But when I get attacks at Mom's apartment, she knows exactly how to help. She sits with me and counts my breaths and tells me I'm brave. She never makes me feel like I'm bothering her, even at 3 a.m. The memory of that night flooded back. Nathan had called me in a panic at midnight. Lily was wheezing, crying, and Ashley was hysterical. I'd driven across town in my pajamas, breaking several traffic laws to get to them. I'd administered her inhaler, calmed her breathing, and held her until she fell asleep. Nathan hadn't even thanked me. People think being rich means being better, but I've learned that's not true. Grandma's friends have lots of money, but their kids are mean and don't know how to share. Mom's friend Sarah doesn't have much money, but she taught me to knit and makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. Mom says the best things in life aren't things at all. Margaret's face had gone pale. She was gripping Richard's arm. Now, her knuckles white against his sleeve. Caroline looked deeply uncomfortable, fidgeting with her portfolio. I love my dad and his family, but they love the idea of me more than the real me. They want me to be perfect and quiet and grow up to be like Aunt Caroline. Mom loves me even when I'm messy or loud or asking too many questions. She says my questions will change the world someday. The letter was nearing its end, but its impact was reverberating through the courtroom. Even the bailiff seemed affected. His usual stoic expression softened. If I have to choose, I choose Mom. Not because she can buy me things, but because she sees me, really sees me. He went on to outline their case. My unstable employment history, my modest apartment in a questionable neighborhood, my lack of family support systems. Each point felt like a needle sliding between my ribs. When it was our turn, Patricia rose gracefully. Your Honor, my client has been a devoted mother who has sacrificed everything for her daughter's well-being. The current arrangement is working, and any modification would be detrimental to the child's emotional stability. She was good, but I could feel the weight of the Hawthorne's influence in the room. Money might not buy happiness, but it certainly bought credibility in family court. The testimony began with Nathan, who painted a picture of our marriage that I barely recognized. In his version, I was perpetually overwhelmed, unable to manage household finances, dependent on him for everything. He spoke about finding me crying in the bathroom, about my inability to adapt to his family's lifestyle, about how much happier and more stable Lily seemed during his custody time. Some of it was true. I had cried, feeling isolated and judged in their world. But he conveniently omitted his own absences, his drinking, the way he'd gradually withdrawn from our family long before Ashley from accounting entered the picture. Richard Hawthorne testified next, his voice carrying the authority of old money and older connections. He spoke about their family legacy, about the opportunities they could provide, about their concern for their granddaughter's future. We want what's best for Lily, he said, managing to sound both magnanimous and condescending. She deserves stability, the best schools, the right connections. Her mother, while I'm sure she means well, simply cannot provide these advantages. Caroline took the stand with her portfolio, producing documentation of my work history, a string of part-time jobs, freelance gigs, periods of unemployment. She'd done her research thoroughly. As you can see, Your Honor, Ms. Chen lacks stable employment. How can she provide for a child when she can't even maintain consistent income? I wanted to scream that I'd left my stable marketing job to care for Lily when she was diagnosed with asthma, that Nathan had promised to support us, that every job change had been about finding something flexible enough to be there for our daughter. But Patricia's hand on my arm reminded me to stay quiet. Then came Margaret. Nathan's mother had always been the most vocal in her disapproval, and today was no exception. She stood with the bearing of someone accustomed to being listened to, her voice carrying across the courtroom with practiced authority. Your Honor, I feel it's my duty to speak plainly about Isabella's fitness as a mother. This is painful for me to say, but the child's welfare must come first. She turned slightly, angling her body so she could face both the judge and the gallery. Isabella comes from a background that, while I'm sure is respectable in its own way, hasn't prepared her for providing the kind of life Lily deserves. We've watched her struggle with the most basic aspects of proper child rearing. She feeds the child processed foods, allows excessive screen time, and can't even afford proper extracurricular activities. My hands clenched in my lap. Every word was calculated, designed to paint me as some sort of neglectful parent. The processed foods? Lily's favorite mac and cheese on the nights I worked late. The screen time? educational videos when I needed, to finish freelance projects to pay rent. The lack of extracurriculars? I couldn't afford the country club tennis lessons, but Lily and I spent hours at the public library, at free museum days, teaching her to love learning in ways that didn't require a platinum credit card. Furthermore, Margaret continued, warming to her theme, there's the matter of stability. Isabella has moved residences 3 times in the past 2 years. She drives an unreliable vehicle that's been repossessed once. She can't even maintain consistent health insurance for herself, relying on state assistance programs. Each fact was true but stripped of context. I'd moved to find safer, more affordable housing as the divorce drained my resources. My car had been repossessed when Nathan stopped paying support during one of our legal disputes. And yes, I'd swallowed my pride and applied for assistance because my daughter's medication was more important than my ego. That's when Margaret rose from her seat, apparently feeling that her formal testimony hadn't been enough. The moment is burned into my memory. The way her Chanel perfume wafted across the courtroom, the click of her heels on the floor, the way the morning light caught her pearl necklace as she turned to face me directly. "Your Honor," she said, venom dripping from every cultured syllable. "This woman is nothing but a worthless failure who can't even hold down a minimum wage job. She trapped my son with a pregnancy, lived off his generosity for years, and now wants to drag my granddaughter down to her level. The child deserves better than food stamps and welfare. She deserves the life we can provide." The words hung in the air like smog. I felt every eye in the courtroom turn toward me. The bailiff, the court reporter, the few observers in the rail gallery. Some looked sympathetic, others curious. A few almost seemed to nod in agreement. My face burned with humiliation, but also with rage. How dare she reduce my life, my love for my daughter, my struggles and sacrifices to such cruel simplicity? I wanted to stand up and scream the truth. That her precious son had chosen to have an affair, had chosen to abandon his family, had chosen to weaponize his parents' wealth against the woman he'd once claimed to love. That every struggle I faced was because they'd systematically dismantled my life to prove their point. That their granddaughter was happy, healthy, and loved beyond measure, even if her clothes came from Target instead of Nordstrom. But Patricia's hand pressed firmly on my arm, her silent message clear. Don't take the bait. So I sat there, spine straight, chin up, letting Margaret's poison wash over me without visibly reacting. Inside, though, I was crumbling. Because part of me, the exhausted, beaten-down part that had been fighting this battle for so long, wondered if she was right. Maybe I was failing Lily. Maybe love wasn't enough when weighed against trust funds and private schools. The silence that followed Margaret's outburst was deafening. Even Judge Chen seemed momentarily taken aback by the viciousness of the attack. Nathan had the grace to look uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Richard maintained his stoic expression, but I caught him placing a restraining hand on his wife's arm as she returned to her seat. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought I'd survived their character assassination and could now present my own case. Patricia was preparing to call our witnesses, Lily's teacher, who would testify about her excellent progress, our neighbor, who'd watched me juggle work and childcare with determination, my employer at the marketing firm where I'd finally found stable work again. She knows I want to be a marine biologist, not a lawyer like Grandpa wants. She knows I'm scared of the dark but love thunderstorms. She knows I pick the pepperoni off my pizza and save it for last. She knows me. Judge Chen paused again, and I realized she was near the end of the letter. I hope you understand now why I need my mom. Money can't hug you when you're sad. A big house can't teach you to be kind. Designer clothes can't love you for who you are. But my mom can do all those things, and she does them every single day. Thank you for reading this. Love, Lily Chen. Mom says I don't have to use the Hawthorne part if I don't want to. The silence that followed was profound. Judge Chen carefully folded the letter and set it on her desk. When she looked up, her eyes swept the courtroom with newfound intensity. "Well," she said slowly, "that certainly provides perspective." Margaret suddenly stood, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. That letter was obviously coached. Isabella must have told her what to write. This is manipulation of the worst kind. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Judge Chen's voice cut through the outburst like a blade. "Please sit down." Margaret remained standing for a moment, trembling with indignation, before Richard pulled her back to her seat. But the damage to their carefully constructed case was already visible in the fault lines spreading across their unified front. "Your Honor," Nathan's attorney Fitzgerald rose smoothly, trying to salvage the situation. "While touching, we must question the authenticity and timing of this letter. How did the child even know to write to you? How was it delivered? These are serious procedural questions." "Mr. Fitzgerald," Judge Chen interrupted, "I can assure you that my clerk verified the letter's authenticity before bringing it to my attention. It was hand-delivered this morning by the child's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who confirmed that Lily wrote it in her classroom yesterday afternoon during free writing time. Mrs. Rodriguez offered only spelling assistance, as the letter itself states." She pulled another document from her folder. "I also have here a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Rodriguez describing the circumstances. Lily apparently asked her how to contact a judge because she had important information about her family. Mrs. Rodriguez, being a mandated reporter and concerned about the child's welfare, facilitated the letter while carefully documenting the process." Patricia stood for the first time since Lily's letter began. "Your Honor, my client had no knowledge of this letter. As you can see from her reaction, this is as much a surprise to her as to everyone else." And it was true. I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by my daughter's perception and eloquence. At 8 years old, she'd articulated truths I'd never been able to voice. She'd seen through the material wealth to the emotional poverty beneath. She'd recognized love in its simplest, purest form. "Your Honor," Margaret stood again, apparently unable to contain herself. "Surely you can't base a custody decision on a child's letter. Children don't understand the complexities of providing for their future. They don't comprehend the advantages we can offer, the best schools, international travel, connections that will serve her throughout life." "Mrs. Hawthorne," Judge Chen's patience was clearly wearing thin. "What I'm hearing is that your granddaughter understands quite well what each household offers. She's made a distinction between material advantages and emotional support. At 8 years old, she's demonstrated remarkable insight into what truly matters for her development." She turned her attention to Nathan. "Mr. Hawthorne, do you have anything to say about your daughter's letter?" Nathan stood slowly, his face a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully read. For a moment I saw the man I'd married, uncertain, vulnerable, human. I didn't know she felt this way. I thought she was happy with the arrangement. She never said. "Children rarely do," Judge Chen observed. "They adapt, they survive. They protect the adults they love from difficult truths. Your daughter has been protecting all of you in different ways." Nathan sank back into his chair, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him. He'd been so caught up in his parents' version of success, in proving he'd traded up with Ashley, that he'd lost sight of his daughter's actual needs. Caroline suddenly stood, surprising everyone. "May I speak, Your Honor?" Judge Chen nodded, curiosity evident on her face. Caroline clutched her portfolio nervously, so different from her earlier confidence. "I've been documenting Isabella's failures for months. Job history, financial records, housing transitions. But sitting here, listening to Lily's letter, I realize I've been documenting the wrong things." Margaret hissed. "Caroline, sit down." But Caroline continued, her voice gaining strength. I documented that Isabella moved 3 times, but I didn't document that each move was to a safer neighborhood, closer to better schools. I documented her job changes, but I didn't document that she was always home when Lily got off the school bus. I documented the repossessed car, but I didn't document that she never missed a school event, even if it meant taking 3 buses to get there. She turned to face me directly. I'm sorry, Isabella. We were so focused on what you couldn't give. Lily, that we ignored what you do give her every single day. The portfolio fell from her hands, scattering papers across the courtroom floor. Financial records, employment histories, photographs meant to paint me as inadequate, all of it spreading like accusations that suddenly seemed petty and irrelevant. Richard Hawthorne stood slowly, his dignified bearing intact, but something fundamental shifted in his expression. Your Honor, perhaps we should discuss a recess. I don't think that's necessary, Judge Chen replied. Unless you have additional witnesses? Actually, Your Honor, a voice called from the gallery. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, Lily's teacher, standing near the back of the courtroom. She was a small woman in her 50s, wearing a simple cardigan and the kind of sensible shoes teachers favor. I'd seen her at school events, but we'd never spoken at length. Judge Chen considered for a moment. This is irregular, but given the circumstances. Please approach. Mrs. Rodriguez walked forward with quiet dignity. After being sworn in, she folded her hands and began speaking in slightly accented English. I've taught 2nd grade for 22 years. I've seen every kind of family: rich, poor, traditional, blended, broken, healing. What matters isn't the size of the house or the balance in the bank account. What matters is whether a child feels seen, heard, and valued. She looked directly at me. Lily Chen is one of the most emotionally intelligent children I've ever taught. She's kind to classmates who are struggling. She shares without being asked. She includes children who are left out. These aren't traits that money can buy. These are values that are modeled at home. Then she turned to the Hawthornes. Lily talks about all of you with love. She's proud of her grandfather's business success and her grandmother's charity work. She admires her aunt's achievements. But when she writes stories during creative time, they're always about adventures with her mom. When she draws families in art class, it's always her and her mother, reading together, cooking together, exploring together. Margaret had begun crying silently, her perfectly applied makeup streaming down her cheeks. Richard sat stone-faced, but I could see his jaw working as he processed this information. Last month, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, we had a cultural Heritage Day. Students were asked to bring something representing their family's background. Some children brought elaborate presentations prepared by their parents. Lily brought lumpia that she and her mother had made together. She taught the class 3 words in Tagalog and told us about her grandmother, her mother's mother, who she's never met but knows through stories. She spoke with such pride about being Filipino-American, about being part of multiple cultures. That kind of confident identity doesn't come from money. It comes from love. Patricia squeezed my hand under the table as Mrs. Rodriguez continued. I've watched Lily navigate her parents' divorce with remarkable grace. She doesn't play parents against each other. She doesn't manipulate for advantages. She loves unconditionally and forgives constantly. Someone is teaching her these skills, and from what I observe at school events and parent-teacher conferences, that someone is her mother. Judge Chen thanked Mrs. Rodriguez and excused her. As the teacher walked back to the gallery, she caught my eye and smiled. A warm, encouraging smile that somehow conveyed solidarity and support. I think, Judge Chen said slowly, we need to have some frank discussion about what's truly in Lily's best interest. But first, Ms. Chen, Isabella, do you have anything you'd like to say? You've been remarkably quiet throughout these proceedings. I stood on shaking legs. Patricia had prepared me for the possibility of speaking, but everything I'd planned to say seemed inadequate now. I looked around the courtroom, at Nathan, who couldn't meet my eyes, at his parents, who seemed smaller somehow, diminished, at Caroline, who offered me a tiny nod of encouragement. "Your Honor," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "For 3 years, I've been painted as the inadequate parent, too poor, too foreign, too emotional, too unable to provide the right kind of life for my daughter. And maybe by certain standards, that's true. I can't give Lily a trust fund or a country club membership or admission to elite private schools." I took a breath, feeling the weight of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. But I can give her something more valuable. I can give her the knowledge that she is loved exactly as she is. I can teach her that worth isn't measured in dollars but in kindness, in integrity, in the difference you make in other people's lives. I can show her that strength isn't about never falling, it's about always getting back up. The words flowed, more easily now, years of silence finally finding voice. Yes, I've struggled financially. Yes, I've had to make hard choices. But every choice has been about what's best for Lily. When I left my corporate job, it was because she needed me more than we needed the salary. When I moved us to a smaller apartment, it was to afford better health insurance for her asthma. When I took multiple part-time jobs, it was to ensure I could still be there for school plays and doctor's appointments and homework help. I looked directly at Margaret now. You call me worthless, but I measure my worth in my daughter's laughter, in her curiosity about the world, in her compassion for others. You say I've failed, but success to me is raising a child who writes letters advocating for others, who stands up for classmates being bullied, who shares her lunch with kids who forgot theirs. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed on. I'm not asking for your approval or your acceptance. I'm not even asking for your money. I'm asking for the chance to continue being the mother my daughter needs, because while you were documenting my failures, I was living my purpose. While you were building a case against me, I was building a human being. And based on that letter, I think I'm doing okay. The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Chen removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes before speaking. In my 15 years on the family court bench, I've rarely seen a case that so starkly illustrates the difference between material wealth and emotional richness. We have before us a family divided not just by divorce, but by fundamental differences in values and priorities. She looked at Nathan's side of the courtroom. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, Mr. Nathan Hawthorne, Ms. Caroline Hawthorne, you've presented compelling evidence of your financial capability to provide for Lily. Your resources are impressive. Your intentions, I believe, are good. You want what's best for your granddaughter, your daughter, your niece. Then she turned to me. Ms. Chen, you've faced significant challenges since your divorce. Your financial situation is precarious, your support system limited, your resources stretched thin. By conventional measures, you are the less capable parent. My heart sank. Despite everything, Lily's letter, Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony, Caroline's revelation, was it still going to come down to money? However, Judge Chen continued, custody decisions cannot be based solely on financial considerations. The court must consider the child's emotional, psychological, and developmental needs. We must ask ourselves, what environment will best serve this child's overall well-being? She picked up Lily's letter again. This document, written by an 8-year-old child, demonstrates a level of emotional intelligence and security that speaks volumes about her primary attachment. Lily doesn't just love her mother, she feels seen, understood, and valued by her. She's developing a strong sense of identity, cultural pride, and empathy. These are not achievements that can be purchased. Margaret started to speak again, but Richard placed a firm hand on her arm. For the first time, he looked defeated, not angry or indignant, but genuinely lost. Furthermore, Judge Chen continued, The testimony we've heard today from Ms. Caroline Hawthorne and Mrs. Rodriguez reinforces what Lily's letter makes clear. The child's primary emotional attachment is to her mother. Her sense of security, identity, and well-being is intrinsically tied to that relationship. She put down the letter and looked at both sides. Perfect parents don't exist. Perfect families don't exist. What exists are people doing their best with the resources they have, emotional, financial, spiritual. The question before the court is not who can provide the best life in material terms, but who can provide the most nurturing environment for this specific child's needs. Nathan suddenly stood. Your Honor, I'd like to withdraw our petition for primary custody. The courtroom erupted. Margaret gasped. Nathan, no! Fitzgerald looked stunned. Patricia gripped my arm. Even Judge Chen seemed surprised. Mr. Hawthorne, she said carefully, are you certain? You have the right to— I'm certain, Nathan said, his voice steady now. I've been so focused on winning that I forgot what we were fighting for. My daughter, our daughter, has made her needs clear. I want to be a better father, but I realize now that doesn't mean taking her away from her mother. It means learning to co-parent properly, to support the relationship that clearly means the most to her. Nathan remained standing, his posture straightening as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The morning sun streaming through the courtroom windows caught his face, and for a moment, I saw the idealistic young man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, before his family's expectations had molded him into someone else entirely. Your Honor, he continued, his voice gaining strength, I need to say something else. For 3 years, I've allowed my parents to turn this custody battle into something it should never have been, a war of attrition against my ex-wife. I stood by while they weaponized our wealth, our connections, our privilege against the woman who gave me the greatest gift of my life, our daughter. Margaret's sharp intake of breath echoed through the courtroom. Nathan, you don't know what you're saying, the stress of this hearing. Mother, please. Nathan's voice was firm but not unkind. For once, just listen. He turned back to Judge Chen. I want to make a full confession to this court, not for legal purposes but for moral ones. Everything my family accused Isabella of, being overwhelmed, struggling financially, having to make difficult choices, all of that is my fault. When I left our marriage, I didn't just abandon my wife. I systematically undermined her ability to provide for our child. Fitzgerald stood abruptly. Mr. Hawthorne, as your attorney, I strongly advise— Sit down, Brendan. Nathan's tone brooked no argument. I'm done hiding behind lawyers and legal strategies. The attorney sat, looking deeply uncomfortable. I watched this unfold with a mixture of shock and something I couldn't quite name. Was this really happening? Nathan pulled out his phone and scrolled through it before continuing. I have here a record of every child support payment I've made, and more importantly, every payment I've delayed, disputed, or manipulated. When Isabella needed to move to a safer apartment, I contested the expense. When Lily's asthma medication wasn't fully covered by insurance, I argued it was an unnecessary cost. When Isabella's car broke down, I refused to help, saying it wasn't my responsibility. He looked directly at me for the first time in months, without hostility. You sold your wedding ring to pay for Lily's summer camp because I had convinced the court that camp was a luxury, not a necessity. You took on multiple jobs because I had my attorney argue that your earning potential meant you needed less support. Every financial struggle you faced was orchestrated by my vindictiveness. The courtroom was utterly silent. Even the court reporter seemed to have paused, fingers hovering over keys. This was unprecedented. A complete reversal not just of legal position, but of moral standing. Caroline stood again, moving to stand beside her brother. I need to confess something too. The documentation I compiled wasn't just research. It was a deliberate campaign to discredit Isabella. We held strategy meetings, Your Honor. She glanced at her parents, then forged ahead. We actually celebrated when we found evidence of Isabella's struggles. We saw them as victories in our campaign. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. This contains all our internal communications about this case. Emails, text messages, documented strategies to break Isabella financially and emotionally until she gave up fighting for Lily. It was never about what was best for my niece. It was about winning. Margaret stood so forcefully her chair scraped against the floor. This is madness. Nathan, Caroline, you're destroying everything we've worked for. No, Mother, Nathan replied quietly. We're finally stopping the destruction we've been causing. Richard Hawthorne, who had remained silent throughout this revelation, slowly rose to his feet. His commanding presence, which had intimidated me for years, seemed diminished somehow. When he spoke, his voice carried a weariness I'd never heard before. Perhaps, he said slowly, it's time we all faced some truths. He looked at his wife, then at his children, before addressing Judge Chen. Your Honor, I built my business empire on the principle of winning at all costs. I taught my children that Hawthorns don't lose, that we use every advantage available to ensure victory. I see now that I've created a family that knows how to conquer but not how to love. He turned to me, and for the first time in our entire acquaintance, Richard Hawthorne looked me directly in the eye with something approaching respect. Isabella, you were never the problem. We were. You represented something we couldn't understand. Someone who measured success differently, who valued things we couldn't put a price tag on. Rather than try to understand, we tried to destroy. Patricia leaned close to me and whispered, "Don't say anything. Let this play out." But I couldn't have spoken if I'd wanted to. I was watching the complete dismantling of the Hawthorne family fortress, brick by carefully constructed brick. Judge Chen cleared her throat. This is highly unusual. Mr. Nathan Hawthorne, are you formally withdrawing your petition for primary custody? I am, Your Honor. But more than that, I want to propose a new arrangement. Nathan pulled out a document from his jacket pocket. I had my personal attorney, not Fitzgerald, draw this up last night after a long conversation with my daughter. My heart skipped. You spoke with Lily last night? Nathan nodded, his eyes glistening. She called me after dinner, said she had something important to tell me. For 20 minutes, my 8-year-old daughter explained to me what it means to truly love someone. She told me about all the small ways you show her she matters, how you know exactly how many ice cubes she likes in her juice, how you make up silly songs to help her remember spelling words, how you let her paint your nails even when you have work the next day. He swallowed hard before continuing. She also told me how she pretends to be happy at my house because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings, how she counts the days until she goes back to you, how she worries about you being lonely when she's gone. No child should carry those burdens. I created that situation and I need to fix it. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Chen. This proposes that Isabella maintain primary physical custody with liberal visitation for me. But more importantly, it includes a full financial support package, back payment of all disputed support, coverage of Isabella's legal fees, and a trust fund for Lily's education that Isabella will control. Fitzgerald looked appalled. Nathan, this is extremely generous. It's not generous, Nathan interrupted. It's just. It's what I should have done from the beginning. Margaret walked toward Nathan, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. You're throwing away everything. We've built everything we've planned for Lily's future. No, Mother, Nathan replied gently but firmly. I'm finally building something worthwhile. A relationship with my daughter based on truth, not manipulation. A co-parenting partnership based on respect, not warfare. Caroline added, and I want to help. Isabella, I know I have no right to ask, but I'd like to be a real aunt to Lily. Not the Hawthorne kind of aunt who judges and schemes, but the kind who shows up for recitals and helps with homework and maybe learns to make lumpia alongside you both. Judge Chen had been reading through Nathan's proposal while this family drama unfolded. When she looked up, there was something almost like wonder in her expression. In 15 years on this bench, I've never seen anything quite like this. A complete reversal not just of legal position but of family dynamics. She stood, commanding the room's attention. However, this court's primary concern remains the welfare of the minor child, Lily Chen Hawthorne. While I appreciate the Hawthorne family's awakening, I need to ensure that any arrangement serves her best interests. She looked at me. Ms. Chen, you've been remarkably quiet during these extraordinary revelations. What are your thoughts? I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. Everything I'd prepared to say, every argument Patricia and I had rehearsed, seemed irrelevant now. I was watching my former in-laws implode, my ex-husband transform, and my whole world shift on its axis. Your Honor, I began, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. For 3 years, I've been in survival mode. Every decision I've made has been about protecting Lily and maintaining our life together, despite constant attacks on my character, my choices, and my worth as a mother. I'm honestly stunned by what's happening here today. I looked at Nathan, then at his family. I don't want Lily to lose her father or her grandparents or her aunt. I never wanted that. What I wanted was for them to see her, really see her, as the amazing, complex, feeling person she is, not as a prize to be won or a legacy to be molded. Taking a deep breath, I continued. If they're sincere about changing, about putting Lily's emotional needs first, then I welcome that. She deserves to have her whole family in her life. But, I paused, meeting Nathan's eyes, trust has to be earned. 3 years of systematic destruction can't be erased by one morning's revelations. Judge Chen nodded thoughtfully. Wise words, Ms. Chen. Mr. Hawthorne, your proposal, while comprehensive, would benefit from some modifications. I suggest we include provisions for family counseling, gradual rebuilding of relationships, and regular review hearings to ensure the arrangement continues to serve Lily's best interests. I agree completely, Nathan said quickly. I know I have a lot to make up for, to both Isabella and Lily. Margaret, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. And what about us? Are we to be shut out of our granddaughter's life? Judge Chen's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Hawthorne, given your behavior in this courtroom today, behavior that included a vicious personal attack on Ms. Chen, I think some distance might be beneficial. However, I'm not inclined to completely sever grandparental relationships unless absolutely necessary. She turned to me. Ms. Chen, what would you be comfortable with regarding the grandparents' involvement? This was my moment, after everything. They'd put me through. I could have demanded they be kept away from Lily entirely. The old me, the hurt, angry, defensive me, might have done exactly that. But sitting in that courtroom, I thought about Lily's letter. She loved her grandparents, despite their flaws. She saw good in them that they'd hidden beneath layers of privilege and prejudice. Supervised visits at first, I said carefully. In neutral locations. Maybe lunch dates or trips to the museum. If those go well, we can gradually expand, but any visit where Lily comes back upset or confused about her worth ends the arrangement immediately. Margaret's face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked fragile, human. I accept those terms. Isabella, She stopped, struggling with words that had probably never crossed her lips before. I apologize. Not just for today, but for everything. I let my pride and my prejudices poison what should have been a loving relationship with my granddaughter's mother. Richard stepped forward, placing a protective arm around his wife. We both apologize. We've been fools, wealthy, powerful fools, but fools nonetheless. That little girl's letter opened our eyes to what truly matters. We'd like the chance to prove we can change. I studied them. These people who had made my life miserable, who had tried to break me, who had wielded their privilege like a weapon. They looked older suddenly, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. The empire they'd built meant nothing if it cost them their granddaughter's love. Lily believes in second chances, I said finally. She gets that from both her parents. For her, sake, I'm willing to try. Judge Chen smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all morning. Now, that's the kind of maturity that serves children well. Let me draft an order that reflects this new arrangement. But first, there's something else I want to address. She picked up Lily's letter again. This remarkable document came to my attention through proper channels, but I'm curious about what prompted Lily to write it. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned she did so during free writing time. Do we know what inspired her? A voice from the gallery spoke up. I can answer that, Your Honor. We all turned to see Sarah, my best friend and emergency babysitter, standing near the back. Judge Chen motioned her forward. After being sworn in, Sarah explained. Lily spent the night at my house earlier this week when Isabella had to work late. She was upset. Not dramatically so, but quietly sad. When I asked what was wrong, she said she was tired of everyone fighting. About her like she was a toy they all wanted, but nobody wanted to share. Sarah's voice was gentle but clear. I told her that sometimes adults get so caught up in fighting that they forget to listen. I mentioned offhandedly that judges are people who listen for a living. Her eyes lit up, and she asked if judges listen to kids too. I said I supposed they did if kids had something important to say. She looked at me apologetically. I never imagined she'd actually write to the judge, but that's Lily. When she decides something needs to be done, she finds a way to do it. Judge Chen chuckled softly. Your friend gave good advice, Ms. Chen. Sometimes it does take a child to remind adults what really matters. She began typing on her computer. I'm going to draft a comprehensive order that reflects the agreements we've reached today. This will include, she listed the terms methodically, primary physical custody to remain with me, generous child support including back payments, coverage of legal fees, educational trust fund managed by me, regular visitation for Nathan with provisions for expansion based on Lily's comfort level, supervised grandparent visits with gradual increase based on success, family counseling requirements, and regular review hearings. Is there anything else we need to address? She asked the room. Patricia stood. Your Honor, I'd like to request that any future modifications to this arrangement require mediation before litigation. The adversarial nature of these proceedings has been harmful to everyone involved, especially the child. Agreed, Judge Chen said, adding that provision to her order. As she typed, I felt a strange sensation washing over me. For 3 years, I'd been in constant fight-or-flight mode, always braced for the next attack, the next accusation, the next attempt to paint me as an unfit mother. Now, suddenly, the war was over. Not because I'd won or lost, but because the other side had laid down their weapons. Nathan approached me hesitantly. Isabella, I know we have a lot to work through, years of damage to repair, but I want you to know that I meant every word I said today. Lily deserves better from me, and so do you. I lost sight of who I was, what mattered. My parents' values became my values, and I lost my soul in the process. I studied his face, searching for deception, but finding only regret and determination. Nathan, I appreciate what you've done today. It took courage to stand up to your family, to admit your mistakes publicly. But you're right, we have a long road ahead. Lily needs to see consistent change, not just grand gestures. I understand, he said quietly. I'm starting therapy next week. individual and eventually family counseling with Lily. I want to learn how to be the father she writes letters about, not the one she pretends to be happy around. Caroline joined us, her earlier composure cracking as tears rolled down her cheeks. Isabella, I'm so ashamed. I documented your struggles like they were data points in a business proposal, not the life of a woman trying to raise her daughter. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at this woman who had spent months trying to destroy me, and I saw something I recognized. Someone trapped by family expectations, playing a role that didn't fit. Caroline, forgiveness isn't instant, but I believe in growth. If you genuinely want a relationship with Lily based on love, not ownership, we can work toward that. Judge Chen finished typing and looked up. I'm going to take a brief recess to finalize this order. When we return, I'll read it into the record and we can address any final concerns. Court is in recess for 15 minutes. As people began filing out for the break, Margaret approached me tentatively. Gone was the imperious woman who had called me worthless just an hour ago. In her place stood a grandmother who had finally realized what she stood to lose. Isabella, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That letter. Lily's letter. It destroyed me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. We offered her everything money could buy, but nothing her heart needed. She pulled out a handkerchief, real linen, monogrammed, exactly what you'd expect Margaret Hawthorne to carry, and dabbed at her eyes. I grew up with nothing. Richard and I built our fortune from scratch. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that the best things in my childhood weren't things at all. They were Sunday dinners with too many people crowded around a small table, hand-me-down, clothes that carried the love of older siblings, a mother who knew exactly how I liked my eggs. She looked at me directly, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in those carefully made-up eyes. You give Lily what I've forgotten how to give. Unconditional love, presence, the security of being truly known. I'm 62 years old, and I'm just now learning what you've always known. Can you teach me? Can you help me be the grandmother Lily deserves? The request was so unexpected, so contrary to everything I knew about Margaret Hawthorne, that I couldn't speak for a moment. This woman who had tormented me, who had tried to erase me from my daughter's life, was asking for my help. Margaret, I said slowly, I can't teach you how to love Lily. That has to come from your heart. But I can share what she needs: patience, acceptance, interest in her actual dreams rather than your dreams for her. She's not a Hawthorne princess or a Chen survivor. She's Lily. She likes science books and Taylor Swift and putting mustard on foods that shouldn't have mustard. She hates frilly dresses but loves sparkly nail polish. She's terrified of clowns but fearless about speaking up for kids being bullied. Get to know that person, and the love will follow. Margaret nodded, actually writing notes in a small leather notebook she pulled from her purse. The idea of Margaret Hawthorne taking parenting advice from me was so surreal I almost laughed. But this was what healing looked like: messy, uncomfortable, surprising. As the 15-minute recess neared its end, people filed back into the courtroom. Mrs. Rodriguez caught my eye and gave me a warm smile. Sarah squeezed my shoulder as she passed. These people, my real support system, had seen me through the worst of this battle. Judge Chen returned and called the court back to order. She read through the comprehensive custody order she'd drafted, detailing every provision we'd agreed upon. The language was legal, but the intent was clear. Lily's emotional well-being came. First, financial support would be consistent and substantial, and the entire family would work toward healing rather than warfare. Before I sign this order, Judge Chen said, I want to commend everyone in this room for what happened here today. It takes tremendous courage to admit wrongdoing, to change course, to put a child's needs above adult ego. What started as an adversarial hearing became something quite different, a family choosing transformation over victory. She signed the order with a flourish. This court grants the modified custody arrangement as outlined. The matter is resolved, though we'll reconvene in 3 months for our first review hearing. She looked directly at me. Ms. Chen, you've shown remarkable grace under pressure. Your daughter is fortunate to have a mother who models strength, dignity, and forgiveness. Don't let anyone, including yourself, forget your worth. And then she addressed the Hawthornes. You've taken the first step toward redemption today. The road ahead requires consistent action, not just words. Lily will be watching, as will this court. Finally, she smiled slightly. And to Lily Chen Hawthorne, whose letter prompted this extraordinary turn of events. Young lady, if you're interested in law when you grow up, please come see me. We need more advocates who understand that justice and compassion should go hand in hand. With a final rap of her gavel, Judge Chen concluded, "Court is adjourned." As we gathered our things to leave, Nathan approached once more. "Isabella, I want to start making this right immediately. There's a check in my car for all the back support plus your legal fees. It's certified. No games, no delays, no strings attached." I nodded, feeling the weight of 3 years of financial struggle beginning to lift. "Thank you. Lily and I could use some stability." "There's more," he said. "I want to establish a regular monthly amount that's triple what the court ordered. Not because I have to, but because I understand now what you sacrificed to raise our daughter. Consider it a small step toward making amends." Patricia, who had been silent through most of the dramatic reversals, finally spoke up. "Isabella, I have to say, in 20 years of practicing family law, I've never seen anything like this. You maintained your dignity when others would have sought revenge. That's why you won something bigger than custody today. You won your family's respect, and a chance for real healing." As we walked toward the courtroom doors, Caroline caught up with us. "Isabella, I know it's soon, but Lily's birthday is next month. Would it be okay if I asked her what she actually wants? Not what I think an 8-year-old should want, but what Lily wants." "She wants a microscope," I said, surprising myself by sharing this. "A real one, not a toy. She's been saving her allowance for months. She wants to look at pond water and flower petals and strands of hair." Caroline's face lit up. A future scientist, of course. Does she have a preference for brand or specifications? "I don't know. We've been researching together at the library, but honestly, the good ones are beyond what I can afford right now." "Not anymore," Caroline said firmly. "I'll research the best student microscopes and make sure she gets one that will last through high school. And maybe you'd both come with me to pick it out. I'd like to learn about what she's interested in." The olive branch was unexpected but genuine. "I think she'd like that. But Caroline, promise me something. Don't just buy her things. Give her time. Teach her something you're passionate about. Share yourself, not just your wallet." "I promise," Caroline said softly. I think I'd like to learn who my niece really is, not who we tried to make her be." We emerged from the courthouse into brilliant afternoon sunshine. The Phoenix heat was already building, but it felt different somehow, cleaner, lighter, full of possibility. I pulled out my phone to call Sarah, to let her know the good news, to arrange to pick up Lily, when it buzzed with a text. It was from Mrs. Rodriguez. Lily was bouncing off the walls all morning, hoping her letter helped. Can't wait to see her face when you tell her the good news. P.S. She asked if judges... Write back. Maybe you could help her write a thank you note? I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. My daughter, my brave, brilliant daughter, had done what teams of lawyers couldn't do. She'd spoken truth to power and changed hearts. With her honesty. As Nathan and his family congregated near their cars, having their own intense discussions about the future, I stood in the courthouse plaza and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. The war was over. Not because I'd defeated them or they'd defeated me, but because a little girl's letter had reminded us all what we were really fighting for. Tomorrow there would be challenges. Trust to rebuild, boundaries to establish, co-parenting, to navigate with people who had been enemies just hours before. There would be therapy sessions and supervised visits and awkward conversations. The Hawthornes would have to unlearn years of toxic patterns. Nathan would have to discover who he was apart from his family's expectations. I would have to learn to accept help without suspicion, to lower defenses I'd held for so long. But today I was going to pick up my daughter from my best friend's house. I was going to tell her that her letter had been heard, that her voice mattered, that she'd never have to pretend to be happy again. I was going to hold her close and promise that while our apartment might be small and our car might be old, our life was about to get bigger in ways that had nothing to do with money. As I walked to my beat-up Honda, head held high, I thought about what Judge Chen had said about justice and compassion going hand in hand. Lily already understood that at 8 years old. Maybe the rest of us were finally catching up. I drove away from the courthouse not as a victim or a winner, but as something more powerful. A mother who had protected her child's heart while teaching forgiveness, who had shown that strength isn't about never breaking, but about how you put yourself back together. And most importantly, as a woman who finally understood her own worth, reflected not in bank statements or social status, but in the eyes of a little girl who saw her clearly and loved her completely. The war was over. The healing could finally begin. 3 months later, I stood in the same courthouse hallway, but everything felt different. The walls were still the same institutional beige. The fluorescent light still hummed with that particular frequency that promised headaches, and the air still carried that mixture of floor wax and anxiety. But I was different. My shoulders didn't carry the same weight. My stomach didn't churn with the familiar dread. This time I was here for our first review hearing, and instead of armor, I wore hope. Lily walked beside me, her hand in mine, wearing the dress she'd picked out herself, a simple blue sundress with pockets that she'd immediately filled with rocks she'd been collecting for her microscope observations. The microscope Caroline had helped her choose had become her most prized possession, and our dining table was now permanently cluttered with slides, specimen jars, and detailed drawings of everything from butterfly wings to bread mold. "Mom, do you think Judge Chen will want to see my observation journal?" Lily asked, patting the purple notebook she carried everywhere now. "Maybe after the hearing," I said, smiling down at her. "But I bet she'd love to hear about what you've discovered." The past 3 months had been a masterclass in navigating change. True to his word, Nathan had not only paid all the back support, but had established a trust fund for Lily's education and increased his monthly payments substantially. For the first time in years, I didn't have to check my bank balance before buying groceries or hold my breath when the car made an odd noise. But more importantly, the emotional landscape of our fractured family had begun to shift. Nathan had started therapy, individual sessions twice a week, and family counseling with Lily every Saturday morning. The man who'd once used his daughter as a weapon in our divorce war was learning to be a father who showed up consistently, who listened more than he talked, who was earning back trust one small gesture at a time. "Izzy!" Sarah's voice called from behind us. She hurried over, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." She'd insisted on coming for moral support, even though I'd assured her this review hearing would be nothing like the last one. Patricia Yamamoto arrived next, looking pleased. "Good morning, everyone. Lily, you've grown at least an inch since I last saw you." "Half an inch," Lily corrected seriously. "I'm tracking my growth as a science project. Did you know that children grow faster in spring and summer? I'm testing the hypothesis on myself." Patricia chuckled. "A scientist in the making. How wonderful." The Hawthorne family arrived together, but the dynamic was noticeably different. Richard walked with less aggressive authority and more thoughtful purpose. Margaret had traded her severe suits for softer colors, and actually smiled when she saw us. A genuine smile, not the razor-sharp society grimace I'd grown accustomed to. Caroline waved enthusiastically, and Nathan. Nathan looked like a man who'd finally learned to breathe again. "Good morning, Isabella," Margaret said, approaching carefully. "Lily, darling, how are you?" "Hi, Grandma," Lily said, still a bit formal but no longer tense. "I brought my observation journal. Mom said maybe I could show it to people after the hearing." Margaret's face lit up with genuine interest. "I'd love to see it. Your grandfather and I were just discussing your last email about the ant colony. You've been studying." This was perhaps the most surprising development. At Lily's suggestion, we'd started a family email chain where she shared her scientific observations. To my amazement, Richard had become an engaged correspondent, asking thoughtful questions and even sharing articles about young scientists. Who would have thought that microscopic organisms would be the bridge between a corporate titan and his granddaughter? We entered the courtroom together, not as opposing armies, but as a family still learning to be whole in a new configuration. Judge Chen was already seated, reviewing papers. When she looked up and saw us, a small smile crossed her usually stern features. "Good morning, everyone. I see we have the whole family here today." "Excellent. This is exactly what I hoped to see at our first review." She gestured for us to sit. "Before we begin the formal review, I want to note that I've received all the required reports, family counseling progress, supervised visit observations, and financial compliance documentation. I've also received something unexpected." She held up a folder. Letters. Quite a few of them, actually. From Lily's teacher, from family friends, from the counseling team. All unsolicited, all painting a picture of remarkable progress. She opened the folder and pulled out a letter. This one particularly caught my attention. It's from Dr. Martinez, the family therapist. May I read a portion? We all nodded. "In 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen a family system transform so dramatically in such a short time. The Hawthorne family has demonstrated genuine commitment to breaking generational patterns of control and conditional love. Nathan Hawthorne, in particular, has shown remarkable growth, moving from a position of entitlement to one of accountability and emotional availability." Judge Chen looked up. The letter goes on to detail specific breakthroughs, but what strikes me most is this line. "The child at the center of this case, Lily, has blossomed in the new environment of transparency and mutual respect. She no longer carries the burden of divided loyalties or the weight of adult conflicts." Lily shifted beside me, and I saw her sit up a little straighter, proud to be recognized not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who was thriving. "Now," Judge Chen continued, "let's hear from each of you about how these 3 months have progressed. Mr. Nathan Hawthorne, would you like to start?" Nathan stood, but not with the aggressive posture of our previous hearings. "Your Honor, I've learned more about being a father in the past 3 months than in the previous 8 years. I've learned that showing up means more than expensive gifts, that listening is more important than having all the answers, and that admitting my mistakes to my daughter hasn't diminished her respect for me. It's actually increased it." He pulled out his own notebook. "I've kept a journal too, inspired by Lily. Not of scientific observations, but of moments, real moments with my daughter. Like the Saturday we spent 4 hours at the Natural History Museum because she wanted to see every single mineral specimen. Or the evening she taught me to make lumpia with her mother's recipe, and we got flour everywhere and laughed until our stomachs hurt." His voice grew thick with emotion. "I'm learning that being a father isn't about providing the best of everything. It's about providing the best of myself. And I'm grateful, deeply grateful to Isabella for allowing me to learn this lesson before it was too late." Judge Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. Mrs. Margaret Hawthorne?" Margaret stood gracefully. "Your Honor, I've spent my life believing that love meant control, that providing meant purchasing, that family meant ownership, Lily's letter shattered those beliefs, and these 3 months have been about rebuilding from the ground up. She glanced at me before continuing. I've attended grandparenting classes. Yes, they exist, and yes, I needed them. I've learned to ask Lily about her interests instead of telling her what they should be. Last week, she showed me how to prepare slides for her microscope, and I realized I was seeing my granddaughter clearly for the first time, not as a Hawthorne heir, but as Lily, a brilliant, curious, kind child who gets excited about pond bacteria and can explain photosynthesis better than most high schoolers. Margaret's voice wavered. I've also apologized to Isabella. Properly apologized, not just for my behavior in court, but for years of undermining her as a mother. I was so blinded by my own prejudices and insecurities that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. A woman who loved my grandson with a fierce, protective love that I should have recognized and respected from the beginning. Richard stood. Next. Your Honor, I built my business on the principle of winning at all costs. I'm learning to build relationships on different principles: mutual respect, genuine interest, and unconditional love. I've started reading with Lily every week. Not the Wall Street Journal or business biographies, but books she chooses. Last week it was A Wrinkle in Time, and our discussion about tesseracts and dimensions led to her explaining her theories. About parallel universes. My granddaughter sees the world in ways I never imagined, and I'm privileged to glimpse it through her eyes. Caroline practically bounced up when it was her turn. Your Honor, I've discovered I actually like being an aunt. A real aunt, not just a title. Lily and I have started a Saturday science club. Just the two of us, doing experiments, visiting science museums, watching documentaries. She's teaching me as much as I'm teaching her. Last month, she presented her ant colony study to my colleagues at the firm during lunch, and they were amazed. One partner said he'd never seen such methodical research from someone under 16, let alone 8. She smiled at Lily. I'm learning that being family isn't about shaping someone into your image. It's about helping them become the best version of themselves. Judge Chen turned to me. Ms. Chen. I stood, feeling oddly calm. Your Honor, these 3 months have been transformative. For the first time since my divorce, I'm not in survival mode. I can focus on nurturing my daughter's gifts instead of just maintaining our existence. The financial stability has allowed me to cut back to one job, which means I'm home every afternoon, when Lily gets off the bus. We've established new routines, new traditions, and most importantly, new trust with her father's family. I looked at each of the Hawthornes. I've learned that forgiveness isn't just a gift you give others. It's a gift you give yourself. Watching this family transform, seeing them embrace who Lily really is, has healed wounds I didn't even know were still bleeding. My daughter has her whole family now, not perfect people, but people committed to growth. Judge Chen smiled. And what about you, Miss Lily? Would you like to tell me how these 3 months have been? Lily stood up straight, reminding me, so much of that day 3 months ago when she'd changed everything with her letter. Your Honor, things are much better now. I don't have to pretend anymore. Dad actually plays with me instead of just buying me stuff. Grandma and Grandpa ask me questions about what I like instead of telling me what I should like. Aunt Caroline is helping me enter the district science fair. And Mom. She looked at me with those green eyes that still took my breath away. Mom doesn't cry in the bathroom anymore. The room went very still. I hadn't realized she'd noticed that too. Lily continued. Everyone is trying really hard to be better. Dad goes to therapy and talks about his feelings now. Grandma doesn't say mean things about Mom anymore. Grandpa reads science books so we can talk about them. And Mom smiles more, real smiles, not the kind she used to do when she was pretending everything was okay. Judge Chen leaned forward. It sounds like everyone is working hard to make things better. Is there anything you'd like to see change? Lily thought for a moment. Maybe. Maybe we could all have dinner together sometimes. Not every week, but sometimes. Like a real family, even if we live in different houses. Nathan spoke up quickly. I think that's a wonderful idea. Isabella, would you be comfortable with that? I considered it. 6 months ago, the idea would have been unthinkable. Now? I think we could try. Maybe start with something casual, perhaps a picnic in the park? The botanical garden has a new butterfly exhibit, Caroline suggested. We could make it educational and fun. Margaret nodded enthusiastically. I could bring that Filipino dessert Lily taught me about. Bibingka? I've been practicing the recipe. Richard added, and I could finally meet this famous ant colony Lily's been studying. Judge Chen watched this exchange with visible satisfaction. This is exactly what I hoped to see. A family learning to work together for the benefit of the child. Now, let me address some administrative matters. She reviewed the reports systematically. Nathan had been consistent with support payments and had actually contributed additional funds for Lily's science camp and equipment. The supervised visits with grandparents had progressed smoothly, with the supervisor recommending unsupervised visits. The family counseling reports showed significant progress in communication and boundary setting. Based on all the evidence, before me, Judge Chen announced, I'm modifying the custody order to reflect the current reality. Supervised visits are no longer required for grandparents. The family counseling can move to monthly sessions instead of weekly. And I'm particularly pleased to note that the financial arrangements have exceeded court requirements. She looked directly at Lily. Young lady, your letter 3 months ago showed wisdom beyond your years. Your willingness to speak your truth changed your family's trajectory. Never underestimate the power of honest words spoken with love. To the adults, she said, you've all shown that change is possible when you put a child's needs first. Continue on this path. The next review, hearing will be in 6 months, but based on what I've seen today, I expect it to be a mere formality. She picked up her gavel. Before I adjourn, I have something for Lily. She pulled out an envelope. You asked if judges write back. Well, this judge does. Lily's eyes widened as she accepted the envelope. Can I read it now? Of course. With shaking hands, Lily opened the letter and read aloud. Dear Lily, thank you for your letter. In my many years as a judge, I've learned that the most powerful truths often come from the youngest voices. Your courage in speaking up for yourself. And your mother has not only changed your family, but has reminded me why I became a judge, to help families find their way back to love. Keep observing, keep questioning, keep speaking your truth. The world needs more scientists and truth-tellers like you. With admiration, Judge Angela Chen. Lily clutched the letter to her chest, beaming. She wrote back. Mom, Judge Chen wrote. Back! She did, baby. She really did. Judge Chen smiled warmly. Court is adjourned. Go be a family. As we filed out of the courtroom, the atmosphere was completely different from 3 months ago. There was lightness, hope, even laughter. Nathan fell into step beside me as we walked down the hallway. Isabella, I've been thinking, Lily's birthday is coming up, and I know Caroline got her the microscope, but I wanted to do something different this year. Instead of a party at the country club, what if we had it at the science center? They do birthday parties with real experiments. She'd love that, I said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him now. She's been fascinated by their chemistry demonstrations. And maybe, he added hesitantly, we could co-host it? Show her that even though we're not married, we're still her team? I nodded. I think that would mean a lot to her. As we reached the courthouse steps, Lily was already showing her observation journal to her grandparents, who were genuinely engaged in her explanation of phototropism in plants. Caroline was taking photos, not for social media perfection, but to capture the joy on her niece's face. Mom, Lily called out. Grandpa says he knows someone at the university who studies marine biology. He might be able to arrange a lab visit. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I stood there for a moment, watching this scene unfold. My ex-husband discussing birthday parties with genuine enthusiasm. His parents treating my daughter's interests with respect and excitement. His sister documenting real moments instead of staged ones. My best friend chatting with Margaret about Filipino recipes. It was surreal, but also strangely natural. Sarah came up beside me. You okay? Yeah, I said, meaning it. I really am. 3 months ago, if someone had told you this is where you'd be, I'd have thought they were insane, I finished. But here we are. Here you are, she corrected. You held your ground, protected your daughter, and somehow managed to help heal an entire family system. That's pretty amazing, Izzy. I thought about the journey, the years of struggle, the months of legal battles, the moment when everything changed because an 8-year-old decided to write a letter. Lily had given us all permission to be imperfect humans trying to do better. Her honesty had shattered facades we'd all been maintaining and created space for something real to grow. Ice cream, Lily announced suddenly. Can we all get ice? Cream to celebrate? It's 11 in the morning, Margaret started to say, then caught herself. You know what? Why not? Life's too short to follow all the rules. Richard looked at his wife in mock shock. Who are you, and what have you done with Margaret Hawthorne? She swatted him playfully. I'm a grandmother who's learning that ice cream for breakfast won't end the world. As we walked toward the nearby ice cream shop, all of us, this strange, reconstructed family, I caught Nathan's eye. Thank you, I mouthed silently. He shook his head. Thank you, he mouthed back, for not giving up on any of us. In the ice cream shop, Lily ordered mint chocolate chip in a cup. Bowl, she corrected the server, for better observation of crystalline structures in frozen dairy products, and regaled everyone with facts about the science of ice cream making. Her grandparents listened attentively, Caroline asked follow-up questions, and Nathan actually took notes on his phone for future reference. I sat back, watching it all unfold. This wasn't the family I'd imagined when I'd walked down the aisle, in that little church years ago. It wasn't the nuclear family of sitcoms or the perfect blended family of optimistic self-help books. It was messier, more complicated, and required constant navigation and negotiation. But it was real. It was trying. It was healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel, my brother. How did court go? Do I need to fly down and kick someone's ass? I typed back, court was perfect, and no ass-kicking required. We're having ice cream at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Life is good. Ice cream before noon? Who are you, and what have you done with my responsible sister? I smiled, typing, I'm a mom who's learning that sometimes the best moments happen when you bend the rules a little. As I put my phone away, I caught Lily watching me. She climbed into my lap, ice cream and all, and whispered, Are you happy, Mom? Really happy? I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in her shampoo and sunshine smell. Yeah, baby, I'm really happy. Good, she said matter-of-factly. Because I've been observing, and happy moms smile with their whole faces, not just their mouths. You're doing the whole face smile now. Leave it to my scientist daughter to quantify happiness. But she was right. For the first time in years, I was smiling with my whole face, my whole heart, my whole being. The war was over, the healing had begun, and in a small ice cream shop on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by people who had once been enemies and were now becoming family, I understood that sometimes the best victories aren't about winning or losing. They're about transformation, forgiveness, and the courage to believe that people can change. Lily's letter hadn't just been about custody or living arrangements. It had been about truth, the kind of truth that sets people free to become who they were meant to be all along. As I watched my daughter explain the physics of brain freeze to her captivated grandparents, I realized that this messy, imperfect, evolving family was exactly what she needed. And maybe, just maybe, it was what we all needed too. The future, stretched ahead, full of challenges and changes, negotiations and navigation. There would be bumps and setbacks, moments of friction and periods of adjustment. But there would also be this: a family choosing growth over grievance, connection over conflict, love over law, and at the center of it all, an 8-year-old girl with a microscope and a purple notebook, teaching us that sometimes the smallest voice can create the biggest change, that truth spoken with love can heal the deepest wounds, and that families aren't defined by their structure, but by their willingness to see each other clearly and love each other fully. As we finished our ice cream and prepared to go our separate ways, for now, Lily announced, "Next time we should try the butterfly exhibit and the ice cream, for comparative analysis." Everyone laughed, and in that sound, rich, real, and shared, I heard the music of a family finding its new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.